think.
Okay.
Just
Hi, everybody. Welcome to At the Inn. We are back for episode 5. I am Matt. Of course, I'm here with Mike and Sebastian. Boys, how's your week been?
good,
Amazing.
good. Yeah. As you guys know, because I've been at nauseum talking about it, the World Cup started this morning, which is a soccer tournament that happens every 4 years, and I'm super pumped and excited about it. So, as Canadians, we have probably the best team that Canada has ever had. There we go. Yes, there we go. There's my World Cup update. Yeah, so it just started this morning. One game in the books. It's a tournament lasts for 30 days, so we're pretty excited. I urge you all
Played
to
this morning.
watch Ecuador and Qatar. And Qatar is the first home nation to lose their opening match in the history of the World Cup.
Well,
Granted, they don't really
they're
have
not.
a team.
I was gonna say they're not good, are they? Like compared to some other of the
I'm
usual
pretty
host
sure they
nations.
didn't even have a national team until it was announced that they were hosting the World Cup.
Now,
Sweet.
I'm going to throw a little piece of weird trivia in there. It's not pronounced Qatar. It's pronounced Qatar.
Well, tell that to everybody else.
I know it's one of those things.
Is it really?
I didn't learn
Yeah.
about it until about 6 months ago when I heard somebody else on a podcast
Yeah.
explain. It's like that's not how it's pronounced. I'm like, okay.
So funny thing is, I actually got a acquaintance of mine that comes to the pub I work at actually got a bid for tickets for Qatar for
Okay.
Canada games, and
Really?
he asked me to go with him, and then we kind of worked out how much it would cost to go for 3 days for one game,
Oh, good God.
and it was like there is no shot we can afford this. It was, I'm not kidding you, it was probably about $13,000 just to go to see one game with the
Wow.
flight and the hotel and the cost of the ticket and the food. So it's quite
Wow.
expensive. So, but yeah, we don't talk much about it. I'm for some of you that don't know, I'm a massive soccer fan when it comes to the World Cup. It is the my favorite tournament in all of sports ever. And it's a very special time for this World Cup because Canada is in it, and it's the second time they've qualified for the World Cup ever. The last time was in 1986, and they didn't score a single goal, I don't think. And
No,
this
they didn't.
time around, they have a legitimate shot of making it past the qualifying groups in the World Cup. So it's pretty exciting for Canadians
So
as
can
well. Yeah,
who's in the group against Belgium, Canada, and who else?
Morocco and Croatia. They
Okay.
should beat Morocco. They play Belgium first, which is a good sign
hmm
because no one's got their feet wet, so to speak, in the tournament yet. And Croatia is also a beatable team because their main superstar Modric is in his late 30s, so we don't know how match fit he's going to be.
Nice.
So they have the potential to actually do some damage in this tournament. So
Which is
yeah,
good.
Well, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It's exciting.
yeah. So if anyone isn't around, if anyone is free on Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and it's Canadian, go ahead, watch the game. It's going to be exciting. But yeah, that's it. So my week was spent prepping for today, and then my next 30 days were pretty much going to be watching soccer.
All right. I mean, fair enough. Like, go Canada. Always up to see us do something where we're not
Mhm.
getting embarrassed. But let's be honest, we've been spanking the rest of the world in hockey for as long as we've been
Yep.
flying around the world. So we got to lose at something, I suppose.
Well, we got a
We're
lot,
good.
a lot of talent on that
Um,
team, and we got a great coach, right? The
We
former
do.
women's coach, John Herdman. He's awesome.
So here's
Awesome.
a John Herdman lives about a block and a half away from my sister.
No kidding.
Yep. They
Wow. That is cool.
and they tell me every time I go over there, "Hey, do you know that John Herdman lives a block?" I'm like, "Yes, you say that every time I'm over here."
Oh, that's too
But
funny.
yeah, you could drive by his house. There's a giant soccer net in the backyard. Yeah, it's it's
Oh,
it's
amazing.
pretty cool. He's done
that's cool.
wonders for Canadian soccer.
Oh,
But
for
yeah,
sure.
anyways, Mike, do you have anything going on this week or anything
Uh, no, not
exciting?
really. No, normal life, work, being dad, stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
your work is kind of rough. Like you got to go to the top of a ski mountain to fix a pop machine, and then you go skiing.
Well, we're not going to talk about how rough my job can be.
Yeah, that's that
Let's,
that that sounded like a brutal day.
shut up.
Now I do have a question about that. If
Sure.
you had eaten complete shit coming down the mountain and broke your leg, does that qualify as compo or?
It's a very good.
Well,
Should
I
we be talking about this live?
um, I'm gonna say no because I don't think I. Let's just say I broke my leg doing, just skiing because people
Skiing.
do that. I don't see how I could possibly fake that into an injury. If I was gonna, I'd have to fake it and lie about it. So clearly, now that this is live, I could never ski hurt myself and then go on compo. But I really don't care because I wouldn't anyway. I just chalk it up for being dumb, and I signed a waiver, so yeah, I couldn't blame anybody but myself.
All
That's how it
right,
goes.
fair enough. I
Yeah.
just one of those questions I had. I also said while you're talking about the World Cup, I heard a couple of bizarre stories. Maybe you can confirm or deny. I haven't dug deep
Sure.
into this. One, there's a lot of fans unhappy because they're not serving booze.
In the stadium, no, they're
Okay.
not. So
I heard Ecuador, actually, a mutual friend of ours from way back in the day, Chris, was posting earlier that Ecuador fans in particular were quite unhappy during the match today.
Yeah, I bet.
yeah, it's so. As you know, Qatar is in a Muslim country which has very strict liquor consumption laws. And originally, it was allowed to be served alcohol inside the stadium. But a couple days ago, the government said, no, you can't do that. Here's the problem: Budweiser is the main sponsor for FIFA,
Mm-hmm.
and now they can't drink in the stadiums. And so Budweiser actually tweeted, well, this is awkward.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, no
but
doubt.
but that only from what I believe or I understand, it's only inside the stadium. So you can still drink. They
Okay.
serve at like the fan parks that are around the stadium, but
Okay.
at the actual soccer match or football match, as it's known globally, you can't actually consume alcohol inside the stadium walls. So
Okay. All
yeah,
right, fair enough. Now the other story I had heard, and this was an anecdote given to me by somebody at work reading it off his phone. There was some, I guess, agency that was booking trips over there for the World Cup, and when people showed up, they found out that their hotel accommodations were tents on a tarmac somewhere. Did you hear
yep.
anything about that?
Oof.
I
Okay.
have seen
Dude.
pictures of people touring their tent. So the hotel prices in Qatar are like, if if you want to stay in a let's say a 4-star hotel, it's about 1900 pounds a night.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
a lot of the fans are taking to these little fan villa tent things, and you literally, it's like it's about the size of a den. So you walk in and you have enough space for a bed with some like standing room, and then you have your toilet in the corner and a loud air conditioner. So those are like 190 euros a
That'd be
night.
awful. That would be just
Wow.
awful.
Yeah, but you have to understand the size of Qatar. Like it's a tiny little peninsula, right?
Mhm.
It's and you're trying to fit 2 million people plus for a tournament. Like where are you going to put them?
Mhm.
Like they don't
Yeah,
have the
fair enough.
infrastructure to. So yeah, there's a lot of controversy towards that, but that can be for another podcast.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. We can get to that another time.
yeah,
It's just a couple of stories I had
yeah.
heard because I don't follow the sports too much, other than just casually, and so I thought I'd get your opinion on some of those.
If I find the TikTok that I watched, I will send it to you guys about the guy videotaping his accommodations. And some of them don't even have
Perfect.
like real doors. They're just like they're flaps with a zipper that you just zoop. But yeah, well, what can you do? What about you, Matt? Is there anything going on this week?
It's been a really slow week.
Yep.
My wife is recovering quite well from her surgery, and so that's kind of been sort of a focus.
Nice.
And other than that, it was just sort of back to work. It's been almost a month since I've had to deal with a full week of work, so tomorrow morning I start back with the 5 day a week thing.
Eeh.
Which okay, poor me. I had some
You
time
poor
off,
man.
right?
You poor man.
I know it's rough, but at the same time, I'm not looking forward to standing outside a lot. But thank God I'm at
That's fair.
least undercover. Uh, but it's we've hit the slow season, so we're just chilling. Really not a whole lot. Oh, one thing I have been doing with my time off this week, I took one of Mike's recommendations, and I am almost through the second season of The Expanse right now. I
Nice.
think I'm on season 2, episode
Nice.
8. That was quite well worth it.
Hmm.
Once I hammered through those first 2 or 3 episodes that I'd already gotten back to, yes, definitely business picks up
Yeah.
in a
Oh, for
in a
sure.
big way.
Yeah.
You
So
recommend?
I am gonna recommend right now. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm
So good.
fully hooked. I've wasted my entire day today hammering through a bunch of it. We just, we had friends over last night. We started some Christmas movie marathons, and we didn't get a whole lot of sleep. So I just started hammering through that, and
Nice.
it's been well worth it.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll have to check that out at some point
Yeah, it's good.
sooner than later. Yeah.
Starts out
I've
kind of
been,
slow, but once it starts to get going, man, it's a good ride.
it's a banger.
It's a banger.
Absolutely is.
Thomas Jane is amazing.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
I screwed myself over looking up a
Uh-oh.
couple actors on IMDb. So I'm like,
Oh, dude, seriously?
okay. So I had that thing where it's like, oh, this one's in this many episodes, and this one's in this many episodes, and this one I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
don't do that.
son
Don't do
of
that
Yeah,
a.
you
because then
can't
you
do that, man.
know.
It's just, oh yeah.
So it happens. It is what it is. Since discovering IMDb in the early 2000s, it's one of my go-tos. And so if I can't place somebody, I'm like, I know this person from somewhere, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
I regret everything I've just done.
It's all right.
Oh well, it's again,
You'll,
I've
you'll get
said it
over it.
once and I'll say it 1,000 times. I'm a wrestling fan. Sometimes you already know the end of the match without having to think too hard on it. You're
Yeah.
there for the ride.
Yes.
All right, boys. So we're at the end of ink and paper. So we're discussing some books, some seminal books in our lives. Um, which one of you would like to go, Mike? You know what, Mike? Why don't you kick us off? Seb did his soccer thing. I just
Okay.
finished talking. Nobody wants to hear me, anyways.
All right. Um.
It's not true.
Well, we all want to hear you talk, man. Come on. So I'm not the hugest reader in the world. I've read many books in my time, but nowadays I spend most of my time doing audiobooks just because the nature of my
I think
job.
that counts.
It should count.
I
I
think
think
that
it should.
counts as
Yeah, I
reading.
mean,
Yeah.
we are discussing books, so
But the first couple I'm going to do, I opened the book. I have it. There's proof. The Stand by Stephen King. Um, I love this story. I love sort of the apocalyptic sort of, of course, COVID kind of maybe changed that a little bit, but the sort of the virus that turns everything into an apocalypse and the whole, just the way he phrased the whole, how the virus spread and just,
hmm
the story was a little cheesy and it was a little silly getting near the end, but in most things I think with Stephen King books, it's all about the journey. It's not about how the book ends. He's such a wonderful storyteller because most of my books are Stephen King books tonight that I'm going to talk about. But have you guys read The Stand? Or I know Seb, you've seen the miniseries, like
Mike,
1990.
you will be
Please.
happy to know
Uh huh.
I am currently in the middle of reading The Stand.
Amazing.
I
The
am
uncut
like
version.
the uncut version. I'm
Nice.
probably about, I'm going to say, almost 300 pages of the way in.
Oh wow, you're just in the beginning then.
Yeah, well, it's like 900 pages, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And I know what you're talking about, where there was the one chapter where he basically like outlines how the virus
yeah,
spreads, and
yeah,
he just introduces person after person.
yeah.
Like this
And I thought
person
that was
gets it from the
amazing.
cop. The cop stops at a cafe and infects the waitress. The waitress goes home, infects her kid. The kid goes to school, infects the
Yeah,
classmate. That
yeah,
kid goes back to
Oh,
his
it's always
parents'
the
house,
kids.
and but it goes on, and you're
yeah,
just like, holy,
yeah. And
like
it like
how
blows your
easily
mind
it
just
just
to.
spreads. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
he's the kind of writer. He's so prolific. Like he's written how many like 80 books in his career.
Yeah.
And oh man, and I know there were
Yeah.
some substances that fueled a lot of these books, and they were kind of they got a little out there. And this one was teeters on the getting out there with the sort of the supernatural element of the whole book. But
Yeah.
Randall Flagg sort of
hmm
he's in so many of King's books and stories and referenced in the Dark Tower. He referenced, and I think he's even
Yeah.
referenced in The Shining and Doctor Sleep and stuff. I think maybe I'm not sure, but yeah, The Stand. Matt, have you read The Stand or watched the new show or?
I have seen both the original miniseries and I have seen the new one. I really enjoyed what they did with the new one.
Oh,
Um, I think the
I
way they
tried.
did
I
it, they
tried hard.
spaced it out a little better.
Mhm.
That original was kind of hard to get into,
Yes.
but it was still really good.
Uh-huh.
However, at some point, I am going to be bringing up another Stephen King property, and you briefly mentioned Randall Flagg, who is involved in that. So
Mhm.
I'm not big on Stephen King books. I'm not big on horror as a genre.
Mhm.
I've seen a bunch of his movies, for better or worse, depending on what it is. And
Oof, they can be pretty
even
bad.
I think that at one point I was reading an interview with him, and I can't remember what book he was talking about, but he just flat out said, "I don't even remember what I wrote. I was just so ripped on coke, I needed to
Mhm.
get the book out."
That
Yeah.
I'm like,
was oh no, I know what you're talking about. I think that was
"Was it
Dreamcatcher.
was it Dream?" Yeah, okay,
Because
Okay.
they
that
because
sounds about right.
they did that on how to get or what's that podcast called? How did this get made? They did Dreamcatcher
Yes,
on it.
yes,
Oh
Yes.
wow.
that's it. That
And they were saying
that's
he did it
exactly
like
where I
right
heard it.
after his car accident or something like that, or something. I don't know, but he
Yeah,
says he doesn't remember writing the book
yeah.
or something like that.
And
Like that.
he's one of those authors that has cranked out so
Yeah.
many books, and good for him. And he a lot of the times they've turned into decent movies, some better than others. Obviously,
Mhm.
back in the earlier days, they were probably a little bit more prevalent, but he's managed to stay alive, and his Dark Tower stuff is still a viable property.
Mhm.
You see,
Um.
he's definitely the author that pushes. I'm not gonna. Well, I don't want to say it like this, but for lack of better words, he pushes quantity over quality sometimes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So he's not someone that will ad nauseum restructure his stories to try to fine tune and make it perfect. I think he has deadlines to make, and he has a certain quota of how many books he wants to write a year, and he
Hmm.
just pushes through and goes, "Okay, this is what I see," and then moves on with it.
So
Um,
he's not
yeah,
George R. R. Martin.
what is it? 11 years we're waiting for his next book.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well,
But
well,
yeah,
also
I
too,
know
I
exactly what
think
you.
he's big into like as if you're a musician and into jamming and just sort of first
Yes,
pass. Like,
yeah.
okay, this is my idea. I look at a lamp. I got this idea for a book, and then boom, he just sits down and writes it and doesn't think. He just lets it flow and let the creative juices just go. To for better or worse, it could sometimes it works. Sometimes it's like okay, buddy, I don't think
So,
so.
have you guys heard of what a plotter versus a pantser is in the writing world?
No.
No.
Okay, so Dan Brown is a plotter.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Stephen King, from what I've read, is a pantser. So a plotter is a Dan Brown novel, which he'll write like a 40-page outline for it and then write the novel. Stephen King will write a page outline and then just go and
Just
then
go.
explores in that world. So being a pantser, you kind of have organic trajectory through your novel because you're figuring it out as you're writing it. You don't have to fit your characters into a plot. Whereas it's not as efficient because you have to figure out things as you go. Whereas a plotter specifically plans out the story before he even writes a single word of dialogue. So
Mhm.
I'm not saying one is better or the other. It's just, do you want to explore the world more or do you want to make deadlines and stuff like that? So um, the problem with being a pantser is sometimes you are led into meadows of tangents of nonsense that you have to
Well,
kind of like, why am I
look at how
writing?
thick the stand
Well,
is.
there
Like,
you go.
right there, you go. Because a lot of this, it's bloated, and
Yeah.
like I understand. Well, originally the original release of the stand was they cut 400 pages out, and I think for almost for good reason. But
Yeah, they need to make the story move
yeah,
faster, I
right. And
think.
because a
Yeah.
lot of it, even on the audiobook side, it's like the audiobook is like 49 hours. It's a long
Yeah, it's
listen.
so long. Yeah.
All
um,
right.
But I am enjoying it though, for sure.
good,
All
good.
right.
Yeah.
What's first on your list there, Seb?
Okay, so there is a novel that I read. I'm gonna go right off the board here. When I was in creative writing school, there's a novel that was assigned to me, and I thought it was one of the most interesting novels I've ever read in my life. It's called Hardboiled Wonderland and the End of the World. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. You probably
I've heard of
didn't.
it.
So it's by a Japanese author, which his name escapes me right now. Um, maybe somebody can look it up for me as I talk. um, but basically, there's two stories that go on, and all the odd chapters are one story, and all the even chapters are a completely different story. So you there's like a cyber world story with like a guy that has like a computer in his brain that does like data crunching for like bad people, so to speak. And then the other story is somebody in like a medieval town that works as like a dream reader or something like that. And
Oh
you're like,
wow.
these two stories cannot be further from each other. But as you read it, certain things start happening in both storylines. Like, and they start to interconnect as you read through, and it becomes like almost one story at the end. It's
Cool.
just so creative the way it was done. And it's just like you keep reading figure out how it's connected. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting and supremely creative novel. So I recommend everyone to read it if you into that kind of stuff. So that's the
I'm gonna
one.
mess up the
Yep.
pronunciation of that, but there you go.
Haruki
Murakami.
Murakami. Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
That's yeah, so when I first took creative writing in college when I was like in my early 20s, that was the one book that he assigned for us to read in creative writing class. And super enjoyed it. Very, very good book. Very interesting. Um, it's it's very anti-heroish. So like the two protagonists for each story are not the most likable characters. They have questionable moral ethics. But yeah, it's a good read. Yeah, it's an obscure book. I think most people probably don't know about it or have never heard of it. It's by a Japanese author, which was transposed to English, obviously. So yeah, recommend it to everybody. Yeah.
Cool.
What about you, Matt?
Right.
What do you got?
Well, I'm gonna start my list off. You know what? I'm not gonna start off where I was gonna. I'm gonna go with two books that I got for my kids when they were little that we read ad nauseum. One of them was a book that I was read when I was little. The first one is The Balloon Tree, and I will look up an
Okay.
image of that in a minute. And the next one is Go Dog Go, which I swear to God I read every night for 2 years to my
When you were a
kids.
child.
Yeah, when they were younger. I don't remember much from when I was a child, but both of those two books, I were very early on in sharing with my kids, getting their reading going. Both of them can read; they choose not to, but
Yeah.
what can you do?
What
So
can
is
you
that
do?
a book that you read when you were a kid?
The Balloon Tree, yes, it's one that was given to me many years ago. And it's basically a little girl gets a balloon and plants it and it grows into a tree and there's all sorts of wonderful stuff happens. It's one of those feel good stories that's out there. It resonated with me right off the bat. It was just it's something that I had to pass down to my kids when it came down to it.
Is that
So
like the first book you remember reading?
um maybe may maybe I vaguely remember as my parents were expecting my brother, and keep in mind, I'm like 3 years old, so these are very early memories. One of the things they did, because the only child's about to have to share his toys, um, and what they did is they would give me a present for like every day leading up to, it, and it was all books. Um, and that's one of those things where I think that book was actually in there. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. And here we go. And so you can see that. So Phoebe
Balloon
Gilman is the
Tree.
author of that. And like I said, both of these books are things that I absolutely recommend for any parent out there with younger kids. Um, I actually in Go Dog Go is I can't remember the actual name, but it's something Eastman, but it's actually Dr. Seuss.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
Oh, nice.
the art and the wording is a dead giveaway. Well, not even the wording. It's not written in the rhyme of a Dr. Seuss book, but it's a pen name for the same guy that did Dr. Seuss. So when
Gotcha.
you
Yeah.
find that book, it's always in the section. It's always bound and matches the Dr. Seuss collections.
The first book I ever remember reading was James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, like grade 3 or 4 or something. So that
Yeah.
was like
yeah.
the first actual novel I ever read. Um, I can't. I know there's a peach. It goes inside it, but I can't really remember anything
That's
else.
about all I remember too.
Yeah, there's a peach and there's some critters and it
Mm.
got big somehow and yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I know there's a movie about it, but
So,
I
would
don't
it
remember
be
too
safe to
much.
say that those books were like the first ones that kind of like got you into reading,
Um, Balloon
or
Tree for
better?
sure.
Yeah,
Balloon
yeah.
Tree for sure. I don't remember too much about Go Dog Go. And here here we have our most loyal listener. Go Dog
It's a
Go is now a TV
Oh wow,
series.
there you
I
go.
had no idea. And
wow.
Sarah
Okay.
Hi, Sarah.
is
Hi, Sarah.
not only a good friend of mine, but has a kid that's just about to turn 5. So
Nice.
you know, and he's a hell of a little reader too. So he might need to get some books into him. All right, Mike, what do you got next?
Well, I'm gonna keep it in the nothing serious, not real life books because that's just sort of apparently how I roll. I'm gonna go back into Star Wars land, and like it used to be canon. It's not canon anymore. Um, it's a book about, well, it's called Darth Plagueis, so it's the book,
Hmm.
the story of Palpatine's master and sort of their, like, because it wasn't all Palpatine's idea to for the Empire. It was their idea together. And built
Mike,
up.
have you ever heard the story of Darth
Well,
Plagueis?
yeah, actually got this page with that whole thing. That whole, like, did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis was a dark lord of the Sith, so powerful and wise that he could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life. I could keep going, but I won't. But it's a really really cool story because it's so much cloak and dagger and all, because they had to keep that they were a Sith sort of hidden from everybody, and it was sort of the Republic was in a really weird time just before Palpatine took over and all that stuff, and it was, yeah, it was really cool. And then sort of he tells in episode 3, he says how he quote unquote kills him. The book is a little different. The book leaves it wide open that he's not dead. Um, that's why I thought when they put out episode 8, because Plagueis looks just like Snoke. And I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, wow!" And then, of course, it was nothing to do with that at all, and it was rather disappointing. But whatever. But yeah, it's a good read. It's doesn't count as canon, but I blew through it. I think in like
Yes.
3 4 days. It's really good though. It's a good this again, descriptive writing, great. Yes,
There it
great
is. I gotta get
storytelling,
a little.
creative with the backgrounds, really sort of giving you a good visual of how everything looks and how Coruscant and all the other planets they go to look, and just gives you, yeah, just James Luceno is a really good writer.
Well, without spoiling the end, why is Darth Plagueis such an interesting character?
I think his knowledge of the Force is so deep, and it sort of goes down avenues all about the creating life and all this stuff and learning how to keep people
Okay.
alive, and just his, yeah, just stuff like that. And he's a politician too, so he's really good at sort of playing two sides of the same coin, and
Okay.
it's, yeah, really
Yeah.
really cool.
Not
That's
having read
interesting.
it, um, Plagueis to me, just for having imparted all the knowledge that turns Palpatine into the Emperor,
Yeah,
because he was super busy with plots and machinations on
yeah,
setting up
yeah.
the Empire and
Hmm.
getting all that manipulation done so that he could take control. Uh, he had to get the knowledge from somewhere.
Yeah,
Like somebody had to spend their lifetime, and he had to come along going, "Cool."
yeah. And it sort of goes in the beginning of the book. It sort of gives you the sort of the story of Plagueis and his master. I think his name was Tenebris, something like that. And it's sort of the same idea. Only two Sith can coexist. They can't have a third. Palpatine's in the wings. Sorry, Tenebris,
Eat
gotta
it,
go.
kid.
Yeah, that's
You
it.
get that.
Palpatine
Mhm.
sort of, not Palpatine, Plagueis, just took him out in a rather mean way, and sort of that's the way of the Sith, right? And
Yeah.
Palpatine or Plagueis kind of got his near the end of the book anyway. But whatever. I still maintain he wasn't dead. But
Well,
I've
you know
never
what?
read a Star Wars book.
that was the first one I've ever read, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. I'll have to
I
check that
mean,
out.
yeah,
I
totally should.
read a trilogy by Kevin Anderson back in the day on um, sort of how Luke set up his Jedi temple
Oh, cool.
and what Han and Leia running around afterwards. Obviously, I've read a lot of the comic books, but
Mhm.
as far as you're not being canon thing, uh, here's something I can give you. Marvel Comics is doing a really good job of taking a lot of that stuff that is no longer canon and making it canon again.
Yeah.
They are adding it into the Star Wars. They are adding it into the Darth Vader. They are adding it into. They're doing a lot of interesting stuff. It's not all stuff that I am, paying money for, but
No.
most of the good stuff in the canon that is been sort of thrown out will come back.
Mhm.
We will, and especially because Darth Plagueis is such a monumental moment.
Mhm.
Um, in was it episode 2 or 3?
That was 3.
Um, yeah, was it 3?
Like that 2
Where
minute that 2-minute
Yep.
conversation, it just laid the groundwork even for this novel because that's all he had to go on was that and a little bit
Mhm.
Yeah.
from George Lucas, and then he's like, "Just write me a story."
Yep,
And he
It's
did.
like
and
let's
that's
just
so
create. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would venture to say that sooner or later, Marvel and their Star Wars division will get into that.
I hope so.
If
It would
and
just be
if they
really
don't,
cool.
it's probably because the Star Wars the Lucasfilm section of Disney is working
Mhm.
on a film for it. So
Yeah,
a lot of that stuff is more likely going to come back up.
because there's all these, like, new trilogies coming out apparently, like, there's, like, 2
Hmm.
or 3 in the
Yeah.
works, and Taika Waititi's put to one, Ryan Johnson's still tagged to one. Love to see Taika Waititi take on something like Plagueis and just put his own. I know, well, not the he can do serious, he can do serious. He has to. He's not
You know
gonna do
So
what?
funny and
It it says Star Wars, so they're gonna get some of my money and time regardless.
you're
right?
gonna watch
Yeah,
it.
You're gonna
it's
You're
watch it
gonna
no matter
watch
who
it.
does
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna boycott it. I might give the man a chance. All right, Sebastian, what do you have next for us, buddy?
Okay, so I'm just gonna do a bunch of fantasy books. Um, I mean, obviously Game of Thrones, obviously Lord of the Rings, but I don't want to talk about those because it's pretty obvious why I love those. Um, Game of Thrones, I think George R. Martin is one of the most incredible writers ever. Let me just talk about it real quick. His
Please.
way how he describes things is so visceral and so real. Like I just absolutely adore his writing. Lord of the Rings, obviously, because it was arguably the first fantasy book
Yep.
Hmm.
for the most part. So that kind of like opened the door for every other fantasy writer in modern writing history. So we have Tolkien to thank for his masterpiece of Lord of the Rings, for every other fantasy novels that came out afterwards. But the ones that I read, the very first fantasy series I ever read as a kid was the Dragonlance Chronicle series, which was a
Okay.
series of 3 books. Um, they're somewhat dated. Like, there's obviously better quality books in the fantasy genre, but that was the first one I read, which I highly, highly recommend. It was about the War of the Lance and the dragons and whatnot. It's just it was so long ago when I read them, but that kind of like opened my fantasy mind to books. So those are the first 3 I read, and then from that I went into Lord of the Rings. I went into other Forgotten Realms book, other Dragonlance books. Eventually led down to Game of Thrones and fell in love with fantasy. Um, when I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons, when I was like 11, 12 years old, that's when I first picked up the Dragonlance novels, and so that kind of like pushed me into that genre basically. So it was my trigger point into the fantasy realm of novels. So, yeah, highly recommend them. Very entertaining books. Maybe a little dated at this point, obviously, but yeah, they just have a special place with me because I enjoyed the hell out of them when I was a kid. So, yeah, there you go.
Now I'm gonna go back to something you said
Yeah.
earlier about the difference in the two styles of novelists. Where do you think George Martin lies? Is he a plotter? Is he a panzer?
He he keeps a lot of things in his head.
Hmm.
So he's obviously not a plotter because when he originally went to his publisher and said, "Hey, I have an idea for a book series. It's going to be a trilogy."
Yeah.
And we
Yep.
are now on book 6, which
And
he
this,
hasn't
yeah,
written, and
which,
book 7, which is supposed to come out after book 6. So he
well, yeah,
definitely didn't
and
plot it all out, because there was no way that we would have got to 7 books if he had it all plotted out when he brought it to his publisher, right?
yeah,
But
I
even as he writes, he thinks of things as he's writing and goes, "Oh, well, it's going to be bigger." Like, he's gone on record that the Winds of Winter book will be his biggest manuscript he's ever submitted to anybody. So, and as last conversation, which I watched an interview, he says he's about 3/4 of the way done. So we probably going to be waiting another 6 years or so.
Wasn't his books, was it four books, 4 and 5, supposed to be one book too, and they
Yes,
split it into two, just because
because
of how
it
dense
kept.
they were?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
and one of his things is, as Seb was mentioning, he is quite detailed, and I think that
Mhm.
almost works against him
It
because
can be.
he
Yeah.
moves his pieces around. He is very descriptive with everything, and then he must have a massive hard drive of files, let alone a filing cabinet,
Yeah.
um, to just sort everything out, all the houses,
Crazy.
and who is where and doing what. And I used to follow his blog when it wasn't football season. Um, and he's like, well, I had this chapter, but I scrapped it because I realized I wrote somebody into it that's actually sitting over on the other side of the world right now. Oops.
Yeah.
A
So I
lot to
think
keep in
his
your
I
head.
think having all of that in his head almost works against him.
Yeah.
But the books definitely have been worth the wait.
Mhm.
And he does have a couple of, I mean, Fire and Blood he's managed to put out since then. And well, you know what? I'm just going to lean right into it right now. And he also has an anthology series that he has edited. Pardon me, he didn't edit it. He contributed to it, called Legends 1 and 2. This is an anthology series featuring a lot of great fantasy writers. Seb, if you haven't found these books yet, I
I
highly
have heard
recommend
of
it,
them. Yeah.
or come and borrow them from me. Um, it is the who's who of fantasy writers out there, including Stephen King and the Dark Tower series.
Cool.
You get a couple of gunslinger stories in there as well,
Nice.
um, which was my first sort of introduction to the gunslinger. There
Mhm.
is the cover of book
Oh
one.
wow.
Robert Jordan, who does
Mhm.
Wheel of Time. You
Yep.
find prequel to
Yeah.
the Wheel of Time in there as well. Terry Goodkind with the Sword of Truth, another monstrously good series. And then with Pern and the Rift War saga as well. I haven't read much outside of Legends for that, but there's also some stuff by the writer of Outlander. For those of us that have wives that love the TV series, that was my introduction to Outlander through that
Apparently
as
the
well.
books are really good, though. The Outlander
The
books.
books are, no, don't get me wrong. The books are great. I've read a few of them. An ex of mine lent me the first three, so I was like, oh, I know this writer. I know this series, and it was, they focus on Lord John Grey in the Two Tales in Legends 1 and 2. Not so much Jamie Fraser and everything else going on with the time travel there, which is why Outlander kind of took me by surprise when I first started reading it. But in particular, with the George Martin portion of that, it centers a few hundred years before the start of Game of Thrones. On a hedge knight named a hedge knight
Oh,
named Sir
yeah.
Duncan the Tall, and
Mm.
the boy that will become his squire, whose name is Egg. So it's Duncan Egg,
Yeah.
and what we learn right off the bat is Egg is actually Aegon Targaryen.
Yeah.
And as you read through Game of Thrones, when Maester Aemon of the Black Watch is sort of sent south and he's dying, he's talking about Dunk and Egg, or
Yeah.
his little brother Egg, and then Egg eventually does take over the kingdoms as he gets recalled to King's Landing after being a hedge knight's squire for so long, gets recalled to King's Landing and is coronated and has a nice long reign with Sir Duncan as the head of his Kingsguard. And it is hinted at that Duncan actually retires to Tarth,
Okay.
and Brienne of Tarth is a descendant of his because they discuss an old shield she had found, and he describes the shield of Sir Duncan um, as laid out in this first book. So George plotting, um, and then having all this stuff in his head. For anybody that is just looking for, I wouldn't quite call it a
More
bathroom
stuff.
reader because the stories
Yeah.
are, they can be 80 to 100 some odd pages a piece, but it's a good introduction to a lot of stories. The cover there does not do it justice because, I mean, George isn't on the cover. I believe he's on the back cover of that, but it's a great introduction to a lot of it. It's a sampling. It's an appetizer for a lot of different lengthy series. So go out of your way, check those out. Seb, if you can't find them, you can't find the audiobook, you know where the door is. Come on over and borrow them.
Let
I
me
need to
get through
read that.
this. Let me get
Yeah.
through the stand first. I have a question for you guys.
Sure.
Do you guys judge a book by its cover?
I think we're all guilty of that sometimes,
100%.
right?
100%. I think a cover is very important.
Oh yeah, like you go into a bookstore and you're looking at you're in the whatever section floats your boat, and you see like one's just a kind of a boring cover, and the other one's like, oh man, that looks like a lot of fun and lots of shit going on, and
I think
thinking, oh,
the case in point would be the Twilight covers. Remember the Twilight books? That like
never read them.
super glossy black cover with
Oh
like
yeah.
just I think the first one had like an apple or something or a
Mm-hmm.
moon or I can't remember, but like how do you not notice that in a bookstore? Like
Mm-hmm.
it just screams
Yeah.
like look at me. So
Did you ever
Matt,
read those books? Like, were they?
Matt, I think you muted yourself.
Uh oh.
No, you're still muted. No, can't hear you. Technical
Uh oh.
difficulties
Technical
as
difficulties.
Mike and
Please
I
stand.
will just
How about
talk
now?
while
There you
yeah,
go.
there you
Welcome
go.
back.
Yeah,
Hey,
Welcome back.
yeah,
I leaned on the thing.
there you go.
No, I told the story when we were talking about TV series that it was the cover of Game of Thrones on a coffee table that
Exactly. There
made
you
me
go.
find the book right after it had come out on paperback. So
Yeah.
absolutely is. Did not like when they switched that particular series to the mass market version of the color covers. Um,
No, the
and
old version with just like the crown on it, I think. Was it the
Mhm.
crown?
no, the original versions had some sort of scene painted from it.
Yeah.
The Game of Thrones was John in the woods, uh, and the Night's Watch, and then there was the funeral at River Run for a Storm of Swords, and I think something from the Iron Throne room for the second book, and then they went to a more, I guess, market friendly cover where
Yeah.
it's just big title
Yeah.
and everything.
So
But
the
I
one that I
really
had
enjoyed
is the one with the sword hilt on it.
it. Okay.
So that was, and then yeah. So then the second one was the crown. I don't remember what the third one is. The fourth one was like the red goblet.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had that one.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Red Goblin, or I
And
have it
then the
somewhere.
last one is like the shield crest of the dragon or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like it's all like white and stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Yep.
But yeah, that's for fantasy talk. We won't talk about Game of Thrones anymore.
Oh come on.
We'll get off George R. R.
This
Martin.
is going to be an all Game of Thrones podcast at some point here.
You know what? Yeah, let's get away from the fantasy because I do have some other stuff on there.
Okay.
But I am going to give a quick honorable mention to both the Wheel of Time and Sword of Truth series. Really long series. We're talking 600 to 800 page books a piece. Wheel of Time, 14 books. The original author died
I was just gonna
before
say he
he
didn't finish it.
finished 14, 13, and 12. Found a really, really good replacement. And
Didn't
my
his
favorite book of
son
that.
write?
No,
No.
Brandon Sanderson took over.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
And
right.
he's
That's
he's
right.
got his own line of books, but Robert Jordan had tagged him to take over because he had a terminal illness. He says, gave all the notes, gave him everything he had plotted, and Brandon Sanderson filled it in. And by far my favorite finale book. Like I'm weeping reading the finale of that. Um, um, and then Sword of Truth, also just another wonderful fantasy series by Terry Goodkind. Uh, And there's my favorite book on that would be book 6, Faith of the Fallen, and it's a very communism versus capitalism book, um, set sort of in I wouldn't say medieval times, but that sort of sword and fantasy world. So
Did you ever watch the Wheel of Time series on Amazon?
absolutely did. Thought it was great, but we can get into that some other point
Okay.
because we'll
Okay.
that's gonna be a whole episode.
That would probably be a whole episode.
Yeah. All right, let's move on out of the fantasy genre. Mikey, what do you have for us?
Well, so
Unless
okay.
it's fantasy, then go ahead.
Well, it's oh, God. So this book is from 2006, and I read it shortly after my son was born in 2009. It's a book about a father and a son. It's called The Road. They made a movie
Oh,
with Viggo Mortensen, but the
mm-hmm.
book was
Yes.
absolutely heart wrenching. I don't cried when I'm reading very often, but I couldn't help myself. I don't know if it was like new dad brain or whatever, but it's just a story. But it says here, a father and a son walk alone through burned America, and he
Mm-hmm.
does everything in his power to take care and save his son and make sure he stays safe. And I, yeah, been like 10, 12, well, 13 years since I read it. But what a heart wrenching book. It's short. It's not very long. It was only a couple hundred pages. It was an easy read. It just is so good. It just flies by. It's by Cormac McCarthy, and
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend it if neither of you have read it. I don't want to say too much about it because then I'll just give it away. But
I
yeah,
haven't read it, but I have seen the movie. Yeah, that was
the movie was tough too, right? It was
yeah, the movie has its own and again, I think my kids were young when I read that. Um, or when I watched the movie, I should
mhm.
say. So,
I think the
yeah, there's a switch that flips. Like
yeah
in our 20s, we probably could have got through it, but
yeah yeah
there's a connection there, and I'm sure is with his nieces and nephews. It's tough to
absolutely
think.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. I should check that out actually.
you should.
I remember that was a movie with him.
Yeah, it's only 241 pages, so it's a quick read.
A good
It
read.
doesn't yeah, it's a quick good read, and it's just you could probably do it in probably a couple of nights, and then
Yeah.
depending how fast you read. But I couldn't put it down. It was just man, I'm even getting kind of kind of emotional even thinking about it again because it just popped into my head as you guys were talking. I'm like, oh yeah, the road, and yeah, I got a little knot in my stomach just thinking about it
Hmm.
again. So
Well,
gonna have to
that's a
reread.
sign of a
Yeah,
good
Yeah.
book right
right.
there. Is when you can get that emotional reaction, even if you haven't picked it up in a while.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, that's mine.
All right, Mr.
Uh,
Quapich, what do you have next?
okay, I'm gonna say this book, and he's a okay author, but I'll tell you why in a second. It's the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown.
Oh, that
Hmm.
was good.
So, is he a great writer? I don't know if he's a great writer. Can he write a thriller?
Hmm.
Absolutely. It was probably the first book that I read that kind of felt like I was watching a movie. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
not done like a traditional book, where it's like you have these chapters and then there's a beginning, middle, and end. They're more like movie scenes. So when you read Da Vinci Code, it feels like you're reading a movie because it's just like you're in, something happens, and you're out of the scene. And I guess as an aspiring writer myself, it really was like the first time that I ever read something that like felt like I was reading a movie. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
and
Hmm.
it was a book that I couldn't really put down either, because it's like every chapter ends with a cliffhanger, and it kind of like it, it's it's just engaging. It's super engaging. The topic was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Would I say he's one of the greatest writers of all time? No, he's not. But as the book itself, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I couldn't stop reading it. I read it like probably within about 4 days. um I was on vacation obviously, and I just kept reading and reading and reading. It's just he's got a way of ending a chapter where you just immediately want to start the next chapter. So yeah, and the topic obviously was when it came out, it was such a hugely controversial book that like everyone wanted to get their hands on it just because the
Hmm.
Catholic Church deemed it as
Hmm.
like a sin against the Catholic religion, and I think, or whatever. So yeah, the Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. It was the first book of his that I read, and then I started reading all the other books, and very quickly I'm like, there's a formula he uses. Every book is basically fits in a formula, right? But as the first one that I read of his, it was super engaging and exciting. So that one and Angel and Demon are like his two best books. Everything else is kind of like meh, I think. But yeah, Da Vinci Code, if you want like a really good thriller, like read that you can just fire through and is just a page turner, do that. And also, as you know, as I said, as a writer, it actually let me view writing in a different way as well. So it kind of like opened the door to say like, well, you can have short chapters, you can have little chapters with just snippets. You don't have to write all these long chapters all the time. So yeah, that's mine. That's my next
All
book.
right. Okay, good to know. Well, we're kind of running low on time, which has put me in a spot here where I have a bunch more I want to talk about. Um, I'm just going to hit a few real quick and then get to the major one. American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Absolutely
Mm.
great book. The TV series does not do it justice because there's a lot of filler and there's a lot of stuff that they done to expand that world. Highly recommend that. Neil Gaiman also responsible for The Sandman. And when Seb was
Coraline as
talking,
well.
yeah, and Coral, yeah, I mean
Oh,
he
really?
came from
Yeah.
came from comic books, went to novels and movies. American Gods, highly recommend that.
He also
Um,
co-wrote Good Omens with Terry
yes,
Pratchett as
Hmm.
well.
yeah,
I'm
absolutely. And
currently
Terry,
enrolled in his master class. Actually, I just started it yesterday.
Nice.
fantastic. Let me know
Yeah,
how that
his
goes.
story writing master class. So I'm excited about that one.
And when Seb was mentioning it reads like a movie, Sahara by Clive Cussler. It's a long series of books. Clive Cussler is an actual treasure hunter that uses his books to hunt for treasure, by financing stuff. It's part Indiana Jones, part James Bond. Um, but there is a stretch in there where he's talking for about a chapter or two about the main character um, being stuck in the desert and escaping from somewhere and trying to get to safety. Where reading this book, I literally guzzled 2 liters of pop because my mouth was going dry with the description of being in the desert for that long.
Wow,
Oh, wow.
So, and then they made the movie out of it, and I was
appalled.
mad. It took me a lot of years to get over the fact that the movie is never going to be as good as the book there. Um,
It
but
generally isn't, but yeah.
the two I want to hit, biographies, which we haven't really touched on yet.
No, we have not.
And there's two out of the wrestling world that I highly recommend. One is Pure Dynamite. It's much like The Road. It's only a couple hundred pages. It's written by the Dynamite Kid, and I believe he has a co-author in there as well. You really get a look into this because this guy disappeared from wrestling, and we didn't see him for years. It really gets into his story from time to time. It does lean into a bit of a poor me, I need sympathy thing because he fucked himself up, but he doesn't shy away from the fact that he was a dick. He was
Oh,
an
The
wow.
Dynamite Kid.
absolute dick. The Dynamite Kid was a complete prick. Um, and he doesn't shy away from. He's like he even flat out says it. If he's like, yeah, I was a dick. There's a famous story where he was big on practical jokes, ribs backstage, and he got into it with the Rougeau brothers, and Jacques Rougeau sucker punched him and took out a whole mouthful of teeth. Um, but it
The
was one of those
Mountie.
things where it's like nobody had heard from the Dynamite Kid really in years. And there's this book all of a sudden. It's like, oh God, that's and it's he's from the '80s and he was a little dude with muscle on muscle, so he doesn't shy away from the fact. It's like, nope, I was on the gas. I was coked out of my mind. I was drinking too much. I was not good to my wife. I was not good to my kids. I was not good to my coworkers. I was not good to my family, my friends, and karma got him big time. He did end up in a wheelchair before passing away.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Yeah,
and
he had
then
a
the
lot
other
of health
one,
problems.
yeah, he did. And that was a lot of body abuse. I mean, not just the physical impact of his job, but what he did to maintain that in the form of the steroids. Um, and this is back in the '80s where it wasn't supplement stores and everything else. It was anabolic, gas to the tits steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other one from that realm, complete opposite, Bret the Hitman Hart's book. Um,
Okay.
absolutely fantastic. I mean, it delves into a lot of his background, obviously, but it does hit on his two big events, the Montreal screw job,
Yeah.
which I'm so tired of hearing about, frankly, and the death of Owen Hart, and
Yeah.
how that impacted everything, how he was never the same after Montreal, and it got worse after Owen's accident. It delves into
Yeah.
the stroke that he had, how he ended up getting out of wrestling because um, a, a not as well trained wrestler misplaced a kick and basically put his head right off of his shoulders. Um,
Goldberg.
yes, yeah, that, yeah, Goldberg, and he's still bitter about it to this day. But
Yeah.
Brett really opens up and is really talks about his relationship with his parents and his brothers. Um, really talks about, some chapters are really interesting to read, where he's talking about how well him and Shawn Michaels did get along at one point, and how it felt to be stuck in a tag, or
Do they get along
who
at this point, Bret
Brett
Hart
and
and Shawn
Shawn.
Michaels?
I've only heard reports of them getting along just fine. I mean, they're
Because
probably not
they
in each
didn't get
other's
along
Christmas.
for so
Oh
many
yeah, no,
years.
years.
Yeah.
Everything I have heard, I've never heard one instance of anybody denying it. That their reconciliation on Raw in 2000 and whatever it was, 8, 9, I'd have
Yeah.
to look it up, was legitimate. They buried the hatchet in front of the entire world on live TV. And he gets really into it, and it's like, other wrestlers were into the drugs and the drinking. Brett was girls, so they'd all be down
Girls,
there
girls,
partying, and he'd
girls.
find a girl, and he's like, "Yep, wasn't good to my wife because I'm out on the road, and
Yikes.
this is." I mean, the other guys are down there. Like, Jim's not in the room; he's downstairs getting drunk and popping pills and doing whatever. So my
Yeah.
roommate's not here.
Bring him in.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just listening to him open up about, um, after his forced retirement, after Owen, after Montreal, when he had his stroke at a very young age. I think he was actually younger than we are now when he had his stroke, and how that really changed his life and led him back around to reconciling with Vince McMahon and the WWE, so that his legacy was lost, because all of Brett's footage,
Yeah.
the footage of him in Calgary, the footage of him in the WWE, and the footage of him in WCW, every last bit of it that was not personal photographs was owned by the WWE.
Wow.
Every promotion he ever worked
Yeah. They
for.
like to own everything, right? So it's
They
hard
they
to.
like to, and you know what? I'm a fan of the network. I love the fact that they have
Yeah.
it all, but I mean, he really had to take a good hard look and go, I probably could have handled myself better as well,
Yeah.
and went to make up for it. Like, it went to, I would don't want to say reconcile is probably the best word, because his career would be lost.
Yeah.
If he had never made up, if Vince McMahon had decided to, his career would be as hard to find as Chris Benoit's.
Oh, I don't
Wow.
know about that. Mike, do you have any other
One
books
that's
you?
not fantasy, apocalyptic, or Star Wars. Yes, I do. I have.
Okay.
I have one that's actually about real stuff.
All right.
As you guys know, I love to run. Running's fun. And
Yeah.
a couple years ago, well, maybe about 5 years ago, I found this book. It's called Born to Run,
Okay.
and it's written by Christopher McDougall. And so I'll just give you the little synopsis here. This be better than what I can make up. So it says, full of incredible characters, amazing athletic achievements, cutting edge science, and most of all, pure inspiration. Which, if even if you're not a runner, you read this book, you're going to want to go out and try what these guys did. He basically started out with a question: why do my feet hurt when I run? So it just led him down this path of writing this book, and then he went down to
Hmm.
Mexico, found a tribe of indigenous people there, but they basically they're ultra runners, all of them, and they run on like tires. They cut up tires and tie them to their feet and use those, or they run barefoot. They do like 50, 100K barefoot, and
Hmm.
it's the way it's written. It's written.
Hmm.
It's so uplifting, and it just puts a smile on your face, and it just makes you want to get out there, lace up your shoes, and just go. And
Yeah.
again, it's called Born to Run. It's so good. And it leads you to do lots of stupid things when you're not ready to do stupid things running, and then you just hurt yourself, and then you just read the book again, and
Then
you
you're
know,
good to go. Yeah.
yeah, then you're good to go. But yeah, it's so good,
Yeah.
so good.
Born to Run.
Born to
Okay.
Run.
I'll have to check that one out too.
Yeah,
I got one.
Matt, you're glossing over.
Sorry, I'm looking at some data on the other screen.
I have a
That's
book I read, which was actually back in the day. My sister actually wanted me to read it. I don't know if you guys ever read The Secret.
Yes.
So that's the first book I read in that realm of like it might have been the first self-help book I ever read, but it kind of helped unlock the door about personal accountability. And I mean, obviously at its crux, you can't if you just believe something's going to happen, it's not going to believe. Like it's not going to happen. You still need to put the action forward to get it, right? But it unlocked the mindset that you can really do anything that you want as long as you set your mindset right towards it. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you're not going to get anywhere thinking you can't do this.
Yeah.
But you when you think you can do it, like your body changes and switches because now your subconscious is being pushed by yourself thinking like, okay, this is going to happen, right? So and it's just it's full of stories of people overcoming impossible odds to achieve stuff in life. And then obviously as experience teaches us, we get put in situations where we think there's an impossible situation and somehow it works out. So, but it was like the first book I read that kind of like put me along that path. So, I always reference it in my mindset when I get down or depressed or feel like I can't do something. You know, I'm like, well, you can. You just have to switch your mindset. So that was like the first book that kind of like led me down that avenue of reading. So just a shout out to Rhonda Bynes in The Secret.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
I can't agree more. I've done the audiobook on that one.
yeah,
Um, absolutely, it's a wonderful book. You just have to remember it's not all mindset. You actually have to get up and do it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, just
case
sitting
in
there
point.
believing that something's gonna happen and you not doing
Hmm.
any actions about it means it's not gonna happen. You
Well,
still
I
have to
mean,
make the effort to go do it. But
case
yeah,
in point, Mike had an idea. He could be still sitting there believing that the three of us could get together once every couple weeks and do a podcast,
we're
but
actually
he did
doing it.
something about it.
Yeah,
We've done it. This is now
And actually,
episode 5.
I have my son to thank for that because we were talking about. He told me, Dad, you should do a podcast, and I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I think he even said with you guys.
Oh, cool.
And we're in the car, and I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, "Hey, wait
yeah,
a second. I'm like, you know what? Why not? What the hell?
and
Like it, keep us communicating at least too, right? At the very least, keep our
Yeah, I mean
friendship strong.
it's and just to let everybody know behind the curtain, when we shut this down, we kill the live stream. We do have 5 or 10 minutes afterwards where we're just sitting, and it's a lot of it's good to be able to sit down with your guys and talk. And
Hmm.
yeah, we
you
yell
know
at each other and tell us what we did wrong. And no, I'm just kidding. We don't do
They tell me how stupid of an
that.
idea this was, and why did you even
No,
tell us
not.
this?
I've been
But
taking
like,
notes, Seb.
yeah, you said 64 times. What's wrong with
That's
you?
right.
But it's just a case in point of like the beauty of youthful ignorance because you
Mhm.
can't tell a child nothing's impossible because they're
No.
always going to believe it's possible, right? Well, why can't you do it? You just do it, right? But
Mhm.
as we get older, negativity and failure starts to
Yeah.
creep into our back of our minds, and we should never allow failure or negative mindset to become, but it becomes easier to like think about that when you get older, right? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
that's it for me. I don't have any more.
All right, let's
I probably have a lot more, but that's
oh
enough
no,
for
I
today.
think
You
I
need,
think we can come back to circle back around to books again at some point. I think
Yeah,
I think
we
so.
could sit here and drive everybody mental for 3 hours every 2 weeks, or we can just circle back to the topics real quick, just with a couple of words in the title. Recommend a book, Mike.
Looking at When Giants Walk the Earth, this biography of Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
If they were just a complete disaster, and I guess the key word is drugs are bad. And man, it check it out. It's really it's an entertaining read. It's shocking actually, but yeah, it's really good.
Okay, Sebastian, recommend us a book.
if anyone is ever interested in writing a book or a screenplay, I recommend reading Save the Cat. It is a book that tells you why you should write things in a certain way.
Really?
There's a reason, a method for a reason. And real quick, every story, I mean, people that have read it know exactly why it's called Save the Cat, but every story has to have a Save the Cat moment. Have you guys seen The Incredibles?
Yeah,
Yes.
of course.
Okay, you remember the very beginning of the movie where he's driving to the meet the bad guy, and there's an old lady on the side of the road with a cat stuck in the tree, and he stops and like picks the tree up and saves the cat. It's at the very beginning of the movie.
Mhm.
So that's literally word for word save the cat. So your main character has to have a save the
Oh.
cat moment so your audience
Too funny.
will like the main character. So it talks about how to
Is-
write characters.
Is that it?
That's the one. Yeah.
That's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if anyone's ever serious about writing, that's one of the books I would read because it explains a lot of things about why you should write characters in a certain way and stories in a certain way. So it's a good understanding of that. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And just to go back to talking about The Secret and timing, our number
Yeah.
one fan here.
Absolutely.
I mean, Gretzky said it.
Oh, I have that on my wall somewhere.
You
Hold
miss
on.
100% of the shots you don't take.
Wait. It's right
That's
there.
right.
That's amazing.
You miss
Yeah.
100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky.
Absolutely. That was amazing.
Absolutely. And then I'm just gonna go real quick, and I'm gonna recommend American Gods. Briefly talked about it, but I mean,
It's good.
it's a wonderful story about how the old gods have gone away, and what are the new gods we're working with.
And the
And
power
for
of
those,
belief in
there's
those
there's
gods
a
too.
there is a main character. He encounters a man named Mr. Wednesday. Not going to spoil it, but he is an old god. You meet a lot of other old gods, and it's not just a Greek or a Roman pantheon. It's Norse gods. It's African. It's indigenous American and Mayan, and you see them interact with the new gods of technology and media. And what are we worshiping now? So it's a wonderfully deep read with some excellent characters to it.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman is an extremely creative author and writer.
Absolutely. And a hell of
Yeah.
a follow on social media too.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, he's a good follow. Not only will he give you good writing tips, but he's not afraid to fire back at trolls, and he's got a pretty good
Nice.
record on it.
There you
All right,
go.
gentlemen, it's been
Okay.
an hour and 7 minutes. So, from those of us here at the end, thank you for joining us. Please remember to like our YouTube and our Facebook pages. And I am working on the audio only component for those of you that like listening to this on your phone while you're driving or working.
Beauty.
I have found a new program that I've been working with and tinkering with. So, I think I'm
Nice.
going to have some success with that here in the near future.
Awesome.
All right. For Mike,
Till next
Seb,
time.
Till next time.
good
See
night,
ya.
boys.
Bye.
Peace.